Clemmons, and guess what? I am joined by the talented young lady. Riley, how are you doing today?
I'm so good. I'm really, really great. I'm happy to be talking to you. I got my coffee in hand. Things are good.
Oh, I already had my caffeine for the day, so I might have some more a little later, but we appreciate you so much for coming by and joining us here on Kingdom Builder. So exciting stuff for you, Riley. This past Friday was a big day for you because you released your third studio record, Church Pew, and I have to say, what a fantastic record.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's my baby. I've just it's been mine for so long, just listening to it in my car, listening to the demos, playing it for my family. So it's so surreal that people are starting to listen and have the songs and interact with them. It's just the most special feeling ever.
Well, like I said, it's a great album. And my friend and colleague, Catherine Cochran, reviewed it for today's Christian Entertainment. And she said in her review, the entire Church Pew album is such a spiritual awakening. Riley shows us how to rely on our faith through the good and bad times. And she has such a great talent and passion that shows in every song. And I couldn't agree with her more.
That is so kind. I need to thank her in person. That is so kind of her to say that. Thank you. Thank you for
Yeah,
sharing
and I
that.
totally agree. And like we were talking before the interview started, and I actually met you once before when you performed at Hillfest back in the summer of 2020, and the weekend concert nestled in the beautiful green hills of southern New Hampshire. And I very much enjoyed that and meeting you at that show and being able to see you perform. And I'm hoping that sooner or later we'll get to see you down here in the Sunshine State of Florida.
I know. I think soon. I feel like we pass through Florida often. So we'll put it on our list because I want to come. I want to come hang out.
Yeah, that would be totally cool. Well, you know what? I followed your career so far. And, I remember sitting back in my recliner when I got a pre-release of your self-titled debut in 2018. And, after listening to it, I was shocked after listening to the record to find out that this beautiful yet powerful voice behind that debut record was the work of an 18-year-old. I was totally
Yeah.
blown away. I mean, when you look back, you're on your third record now. Church Pew's your third record. Does it seem like, just in the last 5 years that, you've already released three records?
It's a crazy feeling. It feels that way, and yet it doesn't at the same time. I got my start in music really young. I'm a born and raised Nashvilleian, and I started co-writing when I was 14. I was, going to studios after school and writing songs and learning the skill. And I think that the fascinating part about that is when you're 14, 15, 16, so on, leading up to really the creation of my first album, so much of the experience in the studio and in the writing sessions are soaking up the knowledge of the people around you. So the producers and the top liners, and you look around and there are Grammys on the wall and doves, and it's this crazy thing. And so those are the times that I learned to hone the skill and learn to write music. And my first album was such a reflection of where I was when I was 16, 17, 18 years old. And last record was the same. I feel like Church Pew, this album, is me discovering my voice as a 23-year-old woman after being in the rooms and learning the skills, being able to establish what feels like me and what feels authentic to me and what feels natural and all those sorts of things. And so, yeah, it's so bizarre that this is the third record, but at the same time, I'm really proud of the life that led to create the first two as well.
Yeah, and like I said, this new record is called Church Pew. It came out last Friday, and it's a phenomenal record. And like so many great songs on this record. And let's just talk about the record as a whole. How did you come to write this record? How did the title come about? Like it's called Church Pew. Uh, how did the title come along? And tell us a little bit about this record and the writing and recording of it.
Yeah. I've never, I mean, this is the third record for me. I'd never done a record like this before. It was very different. I threw out everything that I had ever known and tried something completely different. So, top of 2022, before I went to write this album, I was in a really intense place of creative burnout. I was really struggling with OCD, and that hadn't been something I'd ever really talked about before, or um, admitted to myself, I guess. So I was really struggling with those feelings of anxiety and just feeling down and feeling creatively burnt out and constantly comparing myself and feeling inadequate. And throughout all of that, I found that I was just creatively at a standstill. And so, like I said, I'd been in the industry for a long time. I'd just been creating, going into studios, throwing spaghetti at a wall and seeing what sticks and all that good stuff. And so, finally, with everything going on, I remember calling my team at the top of 2022 and saying, I think I just need to press pause and figure out what inspires me and what God is trying to say to me right here, right now, at the current season of life that I'm in. And so I took a step back from everything to get quiet with the Lord, to reevaluate, to discover what He was putting on my heart outside of, all the noise of the world. And so stepping back to write Church Pew, I don't take credit for this. This is 100% the Lord, but He was very deliberate. And I had an overwhelming feeling of, okay, this is what's going to happen. You're going to write the record in a little nucleus, in a little shell, in a tiny little camp with just 5 of your closest friends, and that's what we did. And we wrote the whole record in 6 weeks, which I had never done that before. My past records have taken 2 years minimum. And so, on the second day of writing, I was in the studio with my friend, Jeff Pardo, who co-executive produced the whole thing with me, and he's just brilliant, and produced or co-produced all the tracks on it, and Paul Duncan. And I had this title, Church Pew, in the notes section of my phone, and I knew that it was an interesting concept. I hadn't really fleshed it out. And so we started writing the song of, what if church pews could speak? What if they could tell their stories of the highs and lows of life they've seen? We wrote the song, and immediately walking out of the studio, I think we all had this overarching feeling of, oh, that's the main idea of this record. The highs and lows, and all of that being the foundation of a place where the Lord can meet us. And so that became the title track quite instantly, and we wrote the record around that. But yeah, it was a really beautiful experience.
Yeah, and I love the record. And this may be a hard question. I ask a lot of artists this, and a lot of the artists that I've asked have been around for quite some time. So it's almost like when
Mhm.
you ask this question, it's like picking their favorite child, which
Yeah.
is almost a trick question. I have 5, so of course I can't answer
Oh,
that question, because it's like
no.
they all get jealous. Oh, you like her better. Oh, you like him better. Oh, okay, I see how it is. But I always ask artists who release new music what they feel their favorite track is on this record. And I know this may be a tough one, but what song from this record
Woo!
do you feel like that you're most proud to present to fans?
Oh, that's so tough. Um, it is like picking your favorite kid. I will say, I'm gonna jump to what my mom has always told us. My mom and dad have always said this as we've grown up. We'd be like, "Who's your favorite kid?" Joking around. She'd be like, "Well, today it's you." But it always changes. It's like, today you're my favorite, and maybe tomorrow your brother will be, but that's okay. And always like a tongue in cheek kind of thing. But I would say that overarchingly so, my one of the most important tracks on the album to me is a song called Jesus Cries. And it's inspired by John 11:35. It is one of the most special songs I've ever written about Jesus meeting us with compassion in our hardest moments and the times that we're overwhelmed with sadness. And so that song has become really special to me. And I think that was the first concept I had for the record. I remember calling my producer, Jeff, saying, I have a song title called Jesus Cries, and it really has to be on the album. Yeah, that was the first one, but that song is very special to me.
Yeah, and you gotta kind of wonder, like, if we could see the expression on Jesus's face today in the state of our world, like, I really think that he would cry if he saw, like, if we could see his response to everything that's going on right now. And, you know, it's just crazy. You know, we live in a crazy world, and it's good to hear songs like this that really, you know, help us reflect on
Mhm.
life and be able to uh be able to deal with things as they come in a crazy and tumultuous world. And let me tell you about my favorite song on this record. Like you were saying, it's hard to pick. I mean, there was so many songs on this record that I could really connect to. And I'm kind of giving my age away here, but I grew up in the 80s, so I'm in my 40s. So for something like this to really affect me, is just incredible. But my favorite song, I mentioned my friend Catherine Cochran, who wrote the review for Church Pew, and her and I share a similar story. She lost her husband David to COVID, April 2nd, 2021, and I had no idea that only a day shy of 5 months later, on September 1st, 2021, I would lose my wife Shannon in the same exact way. And David was 47. My wife Shannon was
Mhm.
only 37. But I remember sitting down and listening to this new album, and one song that really struck me and captured my attention was the track "This Side of Heaven."
Mhm.
And in all honesty, it got me a bit emotional, and it did the same thing for Catherine as well. But Riley, it really describes the way I felt the last couple of years. And uh, tell me about this song. Tell us about this. So, was there
Mhm.
was there a special someone in your life that like inspired you writing "This Side of Heaven"? Tell us about the song.
Mhm. Man, thank you for sharing that. I can't even grief is, um I mean, I really wanted a song on the record about grief. It is a topic that I'd never approached before, and, part of that was because I had never experienced it before, and so after having my first experience with loss and grief, I really wanted to capture this song. So I'll start with a lighthearted bit of it because, we gotta put some lightheartedness in there, lighten it up. I remember talking to my Nana. Now, she is the sweetest Southern lady you've ever met. Nana is the life of every party. I was just hanging out with her yesterday, and she came up to me, and I oftentimes write songs about the people in my life, about my sister, my mom. I've written songs about everybody. And she was like, "Well, I guess you're not gonna write a song for me before I die." She said that. She looked
Mhm.
into my eyeballs and said that. And I was like, Nana, heavens. And so we're having this whole conversation, and I did end up writing a song for her. So my Aunt Sharon, just the brightest star, walked in, lit up every room, life of every party, biggest heart, tons of stories, big adventurer. She was diagnosed with an aggressive form of cancer a few years back now, and she and my Nana were best of friends. They walked through tough seasons together of loss and heartbreak, and um, they've always been best friends. And as a young woman, watching their friendship has always been such an inspiring thing. And so when my Aunt Sharon passed, watching my Nana grieve, Aunt Sharon, while also grieving her myself, it was messy. It was just really messy and heavy, and I think that as Christians, it can be really, I mean, you know this better than anybody. Dealing with grief is so confusing and is so, I guess messy is the word I keep coming back to. So, wanted to write a song called This Side of Heaven. And the most important thing to me about this song was that we didn't tie it up with a bow on the end. It's that we left it uncomfortable and sad, hopeful, tinged with hope, but mostly just honestly sad because I think that's so much of where we're still a lot missing Aunt Sharon today. But yeah, that's the part of the story behind it. But it's about Aunt Sharon, written mostly from my Nana's perspective.
There's so many songs that I've listened to. It's funny. The last couple of weeks, there was some songs that I listened to that kind of really reminded me, of just the journey I've gone through with my kids over the last couple of years in the absence of their mom. And uh, your track, This Side of Heaven, was one of those songs that was just a really, good bittersweet reminder of those that, we've had here that are no longer here. And the other one was Corey Asbury wrote a song called Kind, and it really kind of described my feelings, like, it, like, especially a part like in the song it says, like, how does God choose those he heals, kind of thing. And that was on my mind for a long time. It's like, my wife was 37. It's like you never think that you lose somebody at that age, but
Yeah.
I realized after all this time, like, I may not know God's plan, but he did have a plan. And while we don't know it on this side of heaven, one day we'll know why those loved ones were called home earlier than we thought. And
Mm.
I'm I hear also, listening to Church Pew, I hear a lot of like different sounding influences on the record. I'm kind of curious, as far as influences and favorite artists go for you personally, who are your musical influences? And is there a particular artist or a singer that really got you thinking, hey, I want to be a singer?
Oh man. Yeah, I mean, I'm a Nashville kid, so I've grown up around such a variety of musical influences. And when I made this record, when we were writing it, as I was preparing to write it, I had a playlist of different songs that I was listening to that were inspiring me, of different influences. And I mean, there are so many. I go back to the incredible Aretha Franklin. Growing up listening to her gospel records was such, I mean, I learned how to sing listening to those records, and I love those records. I look at an artist, a songwriter like Billy Joel. I've always loved his approach to telling a story through music. I look at an artist like Stevie Wonder in terms of bringing some of the gospely soul flair to music, and then I look at my Nashville roots, an artist like the incredible Dolly Parton, and listening to early country music influences like Dolly. And I think that so much of the record as a whole was inspired by that Nashville songwriting, the idea of telling a story, expressing an emotion and feeling through songs and through music and through a chorus. And anyway, that's been a huge part of the inspiration point, is classic Nashville songwriting, the city I grew up in. And that's been a huge piece of it.
That's awesome. And it's funny you mentioned Dolly Parton, because I've been a fan of Dolly's for a long time, but just in the last couple of years, she's done a lot of collaborations with Christian artists. I mean,
Mhm.
she started a couple of years ago. She did the song "There Was Jesus" with Zach Williams. She did the song with "For King and Country." More recently, she did a song that I just heard the other day on a pre-release copy of Natalie Grant's new record. She does a duet with her on there. So is it
Step
safe
by
to say that
step.
is it safe to say that one day you're hoping that maybe you can get Dolly on one of your tracks?
Oh,
That'd be
yeah.
awesome,
I
wouldn't it?
mean, I'm such a Dolly fan. When I did my Opry debut, I sang her version of "I Will Always Love You," just
Oh
in
wow.
homage to some of the early influences like Dolly herself. But I would simply not know what to do with myself if Dolly ever sang on one of my songs.
That would be awesome. Well, hey, she's done it with quite a few of the Christian artists recently,
That's
just
right.
keep that option open.
That's right.
Well, in closing, Riley, every album has an overall message and takeaway. And when listeners are finished listening through Church Pew, what is it that you hope that they take away the most after listening to the record?
Oh, that's such a great question. I think it goes back to Church Pew and track one. The line, "The best of saints, the worst of sinners, and every bit of in between. We all come for different reasons, but Lord knows we all need Jesus, and he's always saving room for me and you." And I think it comes down to, in all the messiness of life, through grief and depression and OCD and heartbreak and loss, from the most beautiful moments of joy and beauty and adventure and falling in love and all of these beautiful experiences, Jesus is very much present in all of them. And I hope that that's the takeaway for listeners to be able to relate to the highs and the lows of the stories of the album with an understanding that the love of Jesus is very close throughout those human range of emotions. That would be the goal for me. I think whenever I write music, the main idea is always to remind people that they're loved and to remind people that they're not alone in what they're walking through. So that would be my goal.
Amen. Well, great takeaway. And that's exactly what I got away from, from listening to this record. And I know Catherine was the same way when she listened to it. She actually had pointed out that song, This Side of Heaven, to me. She's like, have the tissues ready, but go listen to that. And of course, I'm like, you had to make me listen to the song on the record that was going to make me cry before I listened to the rest of it. But such a great record. And, I really appreciate you joining us today. And Church Pew from Riley Clemmons is available now where digital music is sold, and you get more information on her and all of her music. And you can get information on her touring and buy some cool merch while you're there by going to rileyclemmons.com. And while you're there, be sure to follow her on social media as well. Riley, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate your time. And, I'm praying that the Lord can do big things with Church Pew and just use this record to reach people and remind them that Jesus is with us always.
So true. Thank you. Thank you.